if you want to achieve anything, you need a great idea, the best idea. You need to take others on the journey. That's where the EQ comes in. And you need to be super focused around whatever your objective is. Otherwise, you're not going to be successful.
Today, we're talking all about the importance of emotional intelligence for business leaders. We discuss the basic differences between your intelligence quotient, emotional quotient, and focus quotient, as well as how important it is to be adaptable and have a particularly high emotional quotient when dealing with your stakeholders. We're honoured to have Faris on the podcast, who is the founder of Shiageto Consulting, which specifically helps to strengthen and sharpen business strategies through his IQ, EQ, and FQ formula. He's worked with a vast range of startups and global enterprises, namely the likes of Amazon, Mars, Heineken, NHS, and many, many more. I'm Anshika. I'm the founder of Eternity, a collaborative event management startup for weddings, and I'm so excited to be hosting the Bay Lab podcast today, which is powered by HSBC Innovation Banking. Let's get into it. Thank you so much, Faris, for joining us today. I'm so excited to be talking to you on today's episode of the Bay Lab podcast, where we're going to be discussing all things emotional intelligence for business leaders. So let's just get straight into it. So to start off, in very layman terms, can you explain what IQ, EQ, and FQ stand for and how they're different from one another?
Yeah, wow, you throw me right in there, Anshika, because people are like, what the hell are all these Qs? What Anshika is referring to is an equation that I use with my clients, my customers, my friends, and people to say, look, if you want to achieve anything in life, you need three key components. One is IQ, and that broadly stands for intelligence quotient, that I'll explain a bit more. The EQ stands for emotional quotient, and the FQ stands for focus quotient. But really putting that in layman's terms is, if you want to achieve anything, you need a great idea, the best idea. You need to take others on the journey. That's where the EQ comes in. And you need to be super focused around whatever your objective is. Otherwise, you're not going to you're not going to be successful. So IQ, EQ, FQ.
I love that. And I find that in the startup world and a lot of sessions that most founders who'll be listening attend, there's a lot of focus on the IQ and the FQ, and that EQ sometimes gets missed out. I think it's great now to see EQ and community and the benefits of that side coming through, but I'd love to hear a bit more can you share some examples of how emotional intelligence can actually positively impact and influence decision-making in startup growth?
Oh, I mean, 100%. And I'm a massive proponent of EQ. In fact, I've used it to build my own business to where it is. But let's take classic examples. So I work with a lot of startups, and where the EQ is necessary in a room is to really sense how's the other person feeling when I'm proposing an idea or suggestion. Because I've seen very high IQ people or very strong people go butt heads and never take a step backwards. And I always say, if two people are pushing, you're never going to achieve. And what EQ teaches you, or should be in your head, is if that person's pushing, maybe I should pull, right? And then we can go in a direction. So it's that ability to read a room and go, hang on a minute, what's going on here, right? Are we, what's happening in terms of emotions here? And it's not just about who's got the best idea, because let's face it, ideas, there's loads of great ideas, and ideas are like opinions, and, you can have two competing views on exactly the same thing. So bring a bit of EQ into a room, yeah. And, you asked me for a specific example. I'm currently working with a coffee tech company, right? Yeah, there is such a thing, right? They create tech, where the founder is very high IQ. He has brilliant ideas, but he does not like talking to his team. Right. So what he does is he just tries to pushes out the ideas through email to them. And of course they've all got an opinion, but he doesn't really think to sort of consult them, talk to them, really, sense that there is validity to what they've said. And that's just a big gap in EQ. So, we've gone in there and helped him, sort of address that. And it's been like night and day in terms of not only how the team work together, but actually how quickly they're now growing.
Well, actually, that was going to be my secondary question, because when it comes to EQ, like you said, the big thing is about managing stakeholders, right? Whether it be your investors or your employees or your board. And how do you balance that really? So whether it be something, I don't know, like a stage of negotiations, I guess a lot of founders are always negotiating, whether that be equity or whether that be speaking on investor terms or employee terms. Yeah. Where do you think EQ really fits in, and what's maybe your one top tip for every founder to look at themselves and think, okay, maybe I can try doing this differently, and really increase my EQ?
Well, I mean, it depends on what stage of founder you are, right? If in early days, the number one thing I'd say to all founders, and the first stakeholder you should use EQ on, is yourself. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What are your emotions telling you? And often we ignore those. And I think if you haven't discovered it as a founder now, your emotions will be 50% of the success of your business, right? So if you're in a terrible mood or you shout at people, you're not going to have effective meetings. But when it comes to having multiple stakeholders, okay, yes, you can do some stakeholder mapping, and that's more of an IQ kind of task, which is list all your stakeholders. But the real EQ and the real skill that great founders do who have high EQ is the ability to flex. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
is the ability to communicate the same thing in at least 4 different ways, right? Depending on the person in front of them, the stakeholders. It's knowing that stakeholder said, you know what, I'm about to meet with Anshika, and she loves a logical kind of conversation, right? But then I'm about to meet person B, and they love a really emotional kind of conversation. But we're still talking about the same topic, right? As a great leader, I should have the EQ to, even if someone I knew that I meet, is get a sense from them pretty early on. Is the way I'm talking to them resonating? Is it actually, am I cutting, or are they looking confused? Are they beginning to be bored? Are they beginning to get angry? And if I encounter not a positive outcome or not the outcome I want, can I then change without, getting angry at the person or making them change?
That's super interesting. And I guess where you've said there, particularly around it starts from the founder and or the individual to look within themselves. What advice would you say? How does someone do that? Because someone could be listening to this and say, oh, Faris, that sounds amazing, that okay, I need to adapt essentially exactly how I'm speaking to my various stakeholders. But what if you haven't done that exercise to intrinsically understand where you're more naturally inclined? So I may be naturally super friendly and realize, okay, I need to become more formal, or I may naturally, like this coffee tech founder, be a bit more formal and need to humanize myself. How are some of the best ways that a founder can start looking within?
So step number 1, if you don't know, gather 2-3 friends around you and ask them, right? Say, how do I normally approach conversations? What do you normally see me do in those conversations? And be prepared to get like some honest feedback, right? Maybe film yourself in a conversation as well and kind of play it back and see all the things, and the clues will be there. And if you don't know the different styles of conversation, you can look that up. But fundamentally, there are format styles of conversation. So look for the clues. Am I coming up with lots of logic? Then I'm a very logical person, right? Do I like to tell a story? Then I'm a very sort of inspiring person. Am I all about the relationship? Then I'm a very connecting kind of person. Or am I just someone who just talks at people? Then I'm a directive person. Right. So try and understand, and with each of those, there's strengths and minuses. Let's be honest. So also get your friends to explain the strong. We love the logic you use, but you can sometimes just get belligerent with logic. And if somebody, so get that from your friends. So that's the first step. That's why I say have EQ with yourself. Because if you don't know that, right, you're going to be in a bad place when you go into a conversation with someone who needs a different style, because you're completely unaware that there's a mismatch.
We hope you're enjoying the episode so far. We just want to give a quick shout out to our headline partners, HSBC Innovation Banking. One of the biggest challenges for so many startups is finding the right bank to support them. Because you might start off and try to use a traditional bank, but they don't understand what you're doing. You're just talking to an AI assistant, or you're talking to somebody who doesn't really understand what it is you're even trying to do. HSBC have got the team they've built out over years to make sure they understand what you're doing, they've got the deep sector expertise, and they can help connect you with the right people to make your dreams come true. So if you want to learn more, check out hbcinnovationbanking.com.
In your experience, and for founders listening out there, what are some of the most common signs of low EQ that you've witnessed that maybe a founder should be a little bit cautious of?
I think, first of all, there's a lack of self-awareness, but an immediate indicator for anybody in a conversation, it's not just founders, is how much listening versus how much talking you're doing. Okay. And again, if you don't know, the great thing about tech nowadays, we're using Riverside, but you could be using Teams, you could be using Zoom. They give you the data afterwards. So you can literally see your percentage of I spoke versus they spoke. Right? Yeah. Look for other things. And this is why I say recording and playing back. And I often do this with leaders. Look for how many times you both nod in agreement versus how many times there's a disagreement. Right? If there's lots of disagreements, there's a clue there that you haven't got EQ. Right? Because you're not looking to reduce those numbers. Now, some conversations naturally will have a disagreement, right? So it's not a hard and fast rule, but look for these clues, right? And then there's much more sophisticated. So the sort of stuff I look in a room is body language, how those people, are they mirroring each other? Are they summarizing, reflecting back? But just at the basics, work out how much you're speaking versus the other person speaking. Work out how much the meeting was positive versus how much was negative. Those are two good starting points if you want data. Again, we're going back to an IQ world. Give me data, show me the thing. But that's a bit tongue in cheek, but IQ and EQ and FQ are all linked. You can't have one in a vacuum. So if you're going to try and improve your EQ, right, you've got to give it focus, right? It doesn't just happen by accident, right? And you will get frustrated and that will impact, right? So each of these are things, but there's some top tips for founders.
I really love that. And I guess where you've spoken about EQ, IQ and FQ, they all do go hand in hand. What kind of advice would you give a founder who's maybe having a conversation and what's most natural to them as their EQ? So maybe of those 4 categories you said, I'm a very logical person. And that could be what I bring to a conversation. And if I can see that mismatch, what advice would you give to founders stepping outside of their comfort zone? Because I guess that's what EQ is about when it is around adapting. But where you've maybe grown up, say, for example, in a corporate environment, and then you're entering the tech space or the startup space, which is stereotypically known to be a little bit more informal, how do you adapt that without maybe feeling imposter syndrome or out of place?
Yeah. You've touched on a really good point, right? Great founders and great leaders need to flex to fill whatever the team is missing, right? Particularly when you're a founder. So you need each of those 4 styles because sometimes the team will need the logic or the customer will need the logic. Sometimes the team just need telling, right? Do this, do that, right? Other teams, they need you to be their best friend, put an arm around them, right? So you need it. Now, how is the best place, right? Is I tell people you will have a natural style. So one of those will be your natural. You're really good at it. But you know what? It's like going to the gym and only ever doing legs day, right? You need to work on legs, arms, shoulders, because someday that's where the flexing is. You've got to do an arms thing. You've got to reach out and you realize you've never worked out on your arms. So they're really weak. Yeah. So what a founder should be doing, or what any individual, and what we work with people is, let's start doing reps on those weak muscles. So I often intentionally tell people you're going to do the rest of this conversation in that style that you're really rubbish at. Right. Right. So it doesn't matter. Even if we're having a logical debate, I need you to do it just in a telling style, right? In a directing style, right? The reason I'm doing is to get you to build up that skill, because someday you will need that, and you don't want to be using it for the first time in a high pressure situation like a big sale to a client, or you're having a difficult conversation with a key employee. So get 3 reps in, practice with your friends, change your style, right? Do it in the mirror, rehearse. This is what I tell people to do, and it sounds bonkers. Why should I do this in my free time? Because you'll be really grateful when you get into that difficult conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a really interesting point you raised there around what's maybe your, per se, weak point in your skill set, right? When it comes to your EQ. And I guess we're always told as founders, you should hire someone who's better at doing something than you. So your first hire, for example, if you're not naturally inclined to do sales, that should be your first hire. Does that really come into place when you're looking at EQ? So if you have a certain style, should you maybe build out your team or your founding team perhaps with different levels of EQ? How important do you think that is, or does it even play a role?
No, it is super important, right? There's 2 things here. One is you want a broad cross section of skills, because although you might be able to flex, right? Certainly until you're a super flexer, every time you move to a different style is going to drain more of your own internal battery. So why not have someone who is a natural in that gap, so that you don't always have to deplete your battery, right? So have, when you have a big enough team, surround yourself so you have got people who are comfortable, their dominant style is each of those, is what I recommend. But just similar to, modern world where you go and get a service that you don't know anything about. Let's take when you go and take your car in if you have a car, right? If you don't know anything at all about cars, the mechanic will go free rein with you, right? So if you have a minimum knowledge of cars, at least you'll know when they're talking to you, you go, oh, I get that. And it's the same with an electrician or something. So that is the other reason why, yes, you might still use experts, but you having a bit of background ability in each of those skills is really beneficial, so that you don't overly rely and get maybe too led down the path by the expert.
I love that. And I think it's really interesting. And I love that you put it in place of a mechanic and an engineer. And I think a lot of founders I speak to, for example, they'll hopefully resonate as if you're a non-technical founder building a technical business. And there's so many that I've spoken to in recent weeks where you do feel a bit like, okay, I need a base level of knowledge because otherwise this will just go away with the wind. And yeah, so that's really interesting. I guess, what are some of maybe the practices or habits that founders can start to implement to improve their EQ over time, separate to the get your friends in a room, but maybe is there anything that we can do introspectively? I guess you have mentioned recording yourself, but is there anything else you could advise maybe?
Yeah, I think sitting above all those things is put yourself out there, right? Have more conversations that you find slightly challenging to force you to try new things. Okay. Because going back to where the greatest strength of EQ is managing your own emotions.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like I tell a lot of leaders, have micro failures in your world today so that when there are macro failures later on, you'll be much more resilient. So that is one other thing that I would encourage everyone for their EQ building up. And it can be the smallest things. I'm the kind of idiot that does a monthly challenge for myself so that I can intentionally fail, right? So I can intentionally put myself under emotional stress, but in a safe environment. And what I'm talking about is, I'll say this month, I'm right-handed. I'm going to brush my teeth using my left hand, no matter how frustrating that is, right? This month, I'm not allowed to take that particular bus, no matter how frustrating it is, right? Just stupid rules or challenges just to build up my sort of EQ, emotional management side.
I think for any founders listening out there, this is definitely a task that we should set all of them, because it's so easy that your to-do list starts to grow and it's everything which is business related, and very rarely do you work on yourself. And I think now there's a lot more around personal branding and how we appear on social media or LinkedIn. But you're right, sometimes you need to take care of all of the noise, leave that behind, pause on the business, pause on the social side, and actually, like you said, just look intrinsically, right?
Yeah, it all begins and ends with you as a founder, as someone in a startup. So why not invest in that and have fun? Set up a WhatsApp group with your friends who are all doing silly challenges and compare notes.
Yeah. Right. For any founders listening out there, absolutely, we challenge you to do that this month.
There we go. And include me. I'm all more than happy to have a go.
Definitely. Maybe we'll set that as a LinkedIn challenge soon as well. But thank you so much, Faris. It's been an absolute pleasure having you and talking all things emotional intelligence, especially around building a startup. Before we round off, I'm sure you've heard, we have 3 quick fire questions that we do at the end of every Baylab podcast. Don't look too scared. So to start off, who are 3 Asians in Britain that are doing incredible pieces of work that you'd like to shout out on the podcast?
I mean, there's so many, and I love that you put the limiters, because initially I was thinking globally, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, I said this to Amar before and the team, Asian could be so broad. I'm from the Middle East, so I naturally included a whole bunch of Arabs, but I dismissed them, and I'm just going to go with the classic Asian. So 3 people I'd love to give a shout out to. Apart from Amar, who does great stuff, but he gets enough smoke blown up his proverbial. I'm going to call out a gentleman called Abhishek Sakdev. Abhishek not only is sort of champions people in the consumer finance place, but he's also a local counsellor, which is one of the most thankless tasks I've ever heard of, as well as being a very devout Hindu. He manages to balance everything. And then a good friend of mine, Roxanne D'Souza, who's doing great stuff, one of the first female partners in one of the consulting firms that I have as a client, but real role model for all kinds of women and British Asians in that business and in the clients. And then the third one, another lady, Divya Malhotra Malloy, who is building a fantastic nut business. But she's just such a joyful and lovely person. So go and check out her nuts and go and say hello to her. But those are 3 fantastic British Asians that I have the pleasure of calling a friend, but also admiring from afar.
Amazing. We'll be sure to check them out. And how can people find out more about you and your company?
Well, if they're interested to find out about me, come and check out my company, which is called Shiageto. I'm sure we'll put the spelling of that. That's the Japanese word for a sharpening stone. Shiageto.com is our website. If they want to talk to me, come and find me on LinkedIn. There's only one Faris Aranki. I've already checked that. I spend far too much time on LinkedIn, but I do reply to absolutely every message, and I, post every day. So come and drop me a line there and we'll carry on the conversation.
Amazing. And as and when they drop you a line, is there anything that they can do or our audience can do to help you out?
Yeah. Set me some challenges. come and say hello. I just love conversations. That's how I grow personally. So yeah, nothing more demanding than that. Come and say hello and share your story with me, and we'll take it from there.
Amazing. Any final words from you?
Go forth and develop your EQ. Get frustrated. You'll appreciate it in the long run.
Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you next time.